Today we have Stephano De Angelis, a counterterrorism expert from Italy. But before we're talking about his new book, ISIS versus the West, which is now translated in English. But before that, I want to just hawk the London Center's new book, which is Encyclopedia of Militant Islam. And it covers 44 different militant Islamic terror groups. And it's written quite as it says, as an encyclopedia. So you can go through it and find out everything that you need to know about that group. So I have a habit of not giving long introductions. I'm long-winded, but not long introductions. And so I'm going to let Stephano talk about his background. But I'm going to give you a very brief background, and that is Stephano is a counterterrorism expert, hails from Italy. He's been as a professor in the university system in Italy. If I tried telling you which one, I'd probably ruin the name, so I'll let him tell you. But what's very interesting, and I didn't know this until just now, is that shortly after Stephano put out this book, he lost his position in the Italian university. So he must, as Americans know, he must be doing something right. So with that, Stephano, I want to turn it over to you.
So, good morning to everybody. Thank you for staying here. I'm very glad. I'm very honored to stay here today at the London Center, guest of Ellie, General Ernie, and General Bob. And so we are here today for probably talk about my book, but I prefer to talk about the actual situation of our society, because this book is a book on a civilization, on a problem, not just my ideas. This is analysis about the real story that today we live, and probably this is the problem, and this is the facts why I lost my job. When I think about the situation of the West today, the first thing that I think is why we are under attack, why I feel under attack, why I see the values of my society under attack. It's no easy to understand why I think this, and I live in the meantime in Italy. But if someone ever been in Italy in the last 2 or 3 years, maybe can understand me much more than the other that never been in Italy. My country today live in a strange situation. For many years, we are a country that this is the last country against the Soviet Union. In the Cold War, the Western blocs and the East blocs have in Italy like the timeline, like the end line of the democracy and the end line of the communism. We have the large communist party of the West in the Cold War. And this is very important because today we live in a strange situation also for our history. That history has made 50, 60 years ago. And today we live many problems that are built in these years, in the last 50 years. How Islamic terrorism inside my country today? Probably the answer is very easy. Many people know that today Italy is the first country where the political refugees has arrived from 2012 to today. In the last 4 years, around 400,000 people arrived in my country. These people started many times from Libya. Okay, if someone here, the Prime Minister of my country, think that every one of these men and women and child are a very good and brave man, that take a boat and go to another country for find a better life. And probably it is true, but just for the part of these people. These people many times come from Syria, but not only Syria, where today we can find a war from 5 years. Many other people come from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Lebanon, Ethiopia, Eritrea, every country where the Islamic terrorism today has spread its power with a very, very easy situation. Can find a situation very easy for spread its ideology between the poor people and the ignorant people. But, okay, the problem is not just about the refugees. Because before the refugees, we have another great problem. Our mentality, our politically correct. Okay, we are in the United States. This is the land of freedom. But also in the United States, we live under politically correct. If someone in the United States try to say someone that go against the public opinion or the most important media and broadcast or anchorman, probably someone say you are racist, you are conservative, you are many bad words. But for me, it's not too bad word, because it's true, I'm conservative. And if you think that I am offended about this word, you don't understand my ideas. When I talk about the terrorism, I talk about a problem that today try to destroy my civilization. My civilization has born and grown up about some values that no other civilization in the history gave to the people. The freedom, the opportunity. In Declaration of the United States, you can find that everyone have the right to find the happiness. No other one civilization in the history do these rights, give these rights to the people. And why today is under attack these rights? Because is antithetic, is the other side of the values of Islamic extremism. The Islamic extremism see the freedom like the evil. Because the freedom is the best weapon against the extremism. When you are free, you can do many things that the extremists probably don't like. And Massacre of Orlando is an example of how the extremists hate the freedom. The homosexual people are expression of the Western country today, because only in the West you can find the right to be, how do you prefer? You are homosexual? You can be. You are transgender? You can be. You can be everything. Probably just not, you can't be conservative today. Just this. So, but why I lost my job? This is an interesting question. It's an interesting story. And I want to show my story, because my story is very similar to the story of our society today. I'm just a young man when I take my bachelor in sociology, and I write my thesis about the Islamic terrorism. I write a thesis about Al-Qaeda. It's an interesting thesis, and some professors say to me, why you don't write a book about this thesis? That's right, it's right very good. You can try to find a publisher. Okay, I found a publisher, and I write my first book. The publisher say me, okay, you are on the good way to become a target. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. And the first book is a normal book for the people. It's a good book for the values and ideas that try to spread. But it's a normal book because it don't show the every ideas that I have in my brain. It's just an thesis. The second book is not a big deal because it's just a sociological analysis.
What was your first book?
Pillole liquide. And there's a sociological analysis about Ronald Reagan and paleocon and neocon of today. So maybe in Italy you can find just 2 people that know about neocon, paleocon. Big deal. I sold 2,000 copies. Big deal. Yeah. But my publisher isn't happy about this book because he say me, maybe you want to see me failed. You want to see me in bankrupt. Write 3rd book and you need to sold 20,000 copies. If you don't sold, you buy. Oh, interesting. Interesting because I have maybe 30 euro in my trousers. I say, okay, no problem. I will buy if I don't sold, no problem. I write, I sign my contract, and I write this book. Okay, I don't sleep from 1 year for this book, but this is a good deal. It's a big deal because sold 82,000 copies. Okay, now this is not the end of story, because this is a happy end. This is just the first step of the last 6 months. This is the first step of my new life. With these books, I remain invited to the talk show of my country. If someone ever sees Rai Uno, Rai 1, Rai International, Mediaset, and I talk about my ideas in this talk show. And yeah, I understand that the words of my publisher, because I become a target. My blogs grow up and with an unbelievable numbers of followers. 500,000 followers in just 1 year. I become a target. Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah, I know. I become a target in 1 hour. When I go to Rai 1 in the best time of the day, and I talk with Franco Di Mare, an important journalist of my country, and I say, this country in 30 years, in just 30 years, become an Islamic country. He looked me like a mad. Why you say this? Because today we build a perfect country, not just for the refugees, but we build the perfect country for the groups that want to build a Sharia law in Europe. Because someone know about the new laws of my country for help the refugees. Okay, the people that are in employment in my country today are around 47%. People in employment, 47%. This is the real number. But the government find the money for help the refugees and give to the refugees $1,500 every month. Give the home, give the phone, give the free insurance for the health care. So it's a big deal for the refugees. But this is against a much more big deal for the extremism that can go to the Libya without nothing, arrived in my country, found everything. You help probably the refugees and you help also the extremism. Okay, I lost also this opportunity to spread my ideas in television. Okay, I lost many things with this book. But the most interesting question about this book is that I become instructor of counterterrorism in my police department, the police department of my city. So I'm not a soldier. I stay between a soldier, so I don't want to take your job. but I try to do my best to teach the cops of my city about the cultural society, the cultural aspect of the Islamic terrorism. Why Islamic terrorism want to build a Sharia law in our country? Why now build a good version of Sharia law? It's just a nice face of Sharia law that today we have in Italy, because you can do everything if you are extremist, but you need to stay quiet if you are to the other side. Just to be honest, I feel like a target not just for the threats that I receive every day. I feel a target because I see that no one can protect me, because no one don't want to show to the other people his ideas, because maybe can lose a job like me, maybe can become a target like me, maybe can hear from some other one that you are racist, conservative, ignorant, and so and so. These books, today we have English version, the Russian version, and this is many people send me the mail every day. Congratulations, you are a brave man. Yes, I have 29 years old. I'm not brave. Maybe I'm just crazy. Yes, but I think that we need of the crazy people for help this society. If someone of the people that today stay in this room try to think about the life of one man in one country that don't want to protect you, no, try to stop you, try to quiet you and your ideas, because we leave your job, we leave your show, we stop your face, we try to close your mouth. And I think that this is a good way to follow, because if you are not on the good way, no one try to stop you. This is probably the best way that I can find for spread my idea, because if many people in my country that are socialist country today Italy, this is just a new version of the Soviet Union. I'm honest, and that's very sad for me. But also in the Soviet Union, Stalin and Lenin tried to stop. Brezhnev is the best in this policy. Try to stop the opposition, not with the gulag. Don't kill these people, but try to stop these people with a normal laws. Okay, you can't go to television, you can't work, you can't live, you don't have the money in your trousers, you can't have your passport, you can't got your passport, and every day your life become much hard. Every day your life become much hard. Okay, when I'm arrived here in the United States, I think that also in the United States I can find these problems. But no, in the United States every day I find just opportunities with my ideas. And today the United States is very different from 30 years ago, when we have another situation, not just at Capitol Hill, but in the first time at White House. Okay, I know that this is a very different country, but this is also today the best country of the world. And this table is the proof that we are in the last freedom country of the world. Because my words today in my country, I can't spread these words in my country. And today I stay here. I don't know who is the people that now hear me with great difficulty, because my English is not perfect, and I say thank you for your patience. And this is the proof that we are in the freedom country. But the freedom is not free. The freedom also in the United States is under attack. Because if in the evening I try to open the television, I hear just always the same version. This is every media are very similar. Are very similar about the policy, about the president, about the congressman, about everything. The media are always try to spread one idea, and this is also always the same idea, that we need to open the door, we need to help the people that today come from the other countries. We need to change our mentality because we are ignorant. We are too ignorant. For the new century, we need to change. But this change, probably, this is just the first step for the finish, for the deed of the United States. And trust me, I see the finish of my country. I have just 29 years old, but I remember my country 20 years ago. This is a very different country. So I want to pray these people, do your best for save this country. This is the best country of the world. This is the land of freedom and opportunity. And this is not just simple words that you can find everywhere, also on the plane. This is the truth. I stay here and with my words I try to serve not just the United States, but the rest of the world, the people that feel free in the world. And I hope to do my best for go ahead with this work. I hope to do my best for not just for the people, but for the values that can arrive to the people of today from the whole Manchester and give her the freedom that today we live. I'm sorry for my emotion. Every day we live in the freedom because someone fight for this freedom. Today is our time. We need to fight for this freedom, and we need to fight for our civilization. Thank you.
Thank you. It's interesting you said that. I had a meeting with the president of the former Czech Republic, Václav Klaus, who asked me. He said, "Ellie, what is the biggest threat to the West, to Western civilization?" And immediately I thought of one could think of radical Islam. Someone could say Russia, and his answer was he said I was wrong. He said the biggest threat to Western civilization is the West. So this is exactly what you're talking about. If we continue down this road where we limit what we can talk about, we certainly and limit who we can, whether we can talk about, whether we can say radical Islamic terror on television or not, whether the president can call it what it is. That's certainly where our downfall begins. But I want to start, Ernie, if you have any questions or thoughts.
Sure, and I'll be fairly brief because I'm going to have to leave at 1 if you want to hear from some other folks too. So here's my reaction to Stephano's situation. So he's been essentially censured for trying to proffer a different argument to explain this current condition. And he's got a copy of the book right there, Sam Huntington's book, Clash of Civilizations, right there. Sam Huntington published that book around 1992, 93 or so. It was a very important book. Sam proffered a different argument at the time to explain the new condition. The new condition was after the collapse of the Soviet Union. That must mean something. What does that mean? Where we had the bipolar world, the dual superpower world, now there is one superpower. What does that mean? Huntington's analysis was, well, prior to the demise of the Soviet Union, the world pretty much identified, and it's a natural human reaction, to find an identity. The world identified with the West and with the Warsaw Pact, for the most part. This was his thesis. But after the Soviet Union went away, he presumed the West would continue to identify as the West. But he asks himself a question, all right, so who's the rest of the world going to identify with? His conclusion, for the most part, was there would be an Islamic identity for most of the rest of the world. And we've kind of started to see that. He was roundly censured and criticized by the left after that book came out. Roundly criticized. But I think time and the example of Turkey has proven his thesis. So Turkey was obviously set on a secularizing path by Ataturk 70 years prior. But after the collapse of the Soviet Union and recent events, you have to ask, so who is Turkey going to continue to identify with? Well, we think, with the Erdogan government, they've taken an Islamist identity, and I think we know that. All right, but that's one thing. The other piece is this. Even here in the United States, there is a tendency to almost self-censor ourselves in discussions of this nature. And I'm going to use an example of even in my background, in the military background, and Gerald Newman knows this very well. As we study the elements of national power, there are four well-established elements of national power: diplomatic power, informational power, military power, and economic power. The United States is blessed with great power in all of those, but I assert, under this administration, we have mortgaged much of our diplomatic influence. Allies have a hard time committing themselves when they're not sure if the United States is fully behind them anymore or not. All right, the example of Egypt is a perfect example of that. But if elements of this war right now are prosecuted as jihad, and the ISIS identifies as jihadis, can we not also at least entertain the notion that perhaps religion is an element of national power for some groups, where they draw some center of gravity, where they draw some serious motivation? Okay, so I throw that out there, but yet in many circles, it's difficult, if not suggested, that you don't even talk about that. If we're serious about confronting the threat, we have to be honest about the threat. We have to be honest. Thomas Jefferson wrote, "Honesty is the first chapter in the book of wisdom." It's foolish of us not to be honest about the situation. All right.
I'm going to open up to questions. I just so everybody here knows, my hope would be that I can just sit back and listen to everybody else talk on their own. But I'm going to throw out one question, Christina, because you had recently come back from the Middle East. We talk about this idea of you have. Let's just talk about our presidential candidates. You have on one hand, let's open up borders. Let's bring everybody in as many as we can. Let's be hesitant to talk about to call it radical Islamic terror as what it is, and so on. On the other hand, you have a presidential candidate who feels that we shouldn't bring anybody in. Let's close the doors until we can. I think what was his statement? Figure out what the hell is going on. But clearly, as Stephano knows as well, that there are refugees. There are, through your hard work, a resolution was passed to call it genocide. How do we reconcile that? How do we bring people, the appropriate people, and leave the others out?
Well, first of all, thank you, Ellie, for hosting this great lunch, and it's a very interesting conversation. It's my first time joining one of these lunches. It's a great series. And it's a great question. I mean, really it gets at, we've kind of been talking about radical Islam and the refusal of many around the world, but especially here in the administration, to call it by its name. And so in the world that I work in, which is, so I work for In Defense of Christians, which is a C3 nonprofit organization which works to protect and preserve religious minorities, especially Christians in the Middle East. We have been seeing the same challenge. It's been exactly the same thing. We have been advocating for 2 years for the United States to recognize what has been occurring in Iraq and Syria, which is very clear. When you have a group like ISIS, which is beheading people, raping women systematically, and committing any number of heinous crimes of violence, it's very clear what that is according to international law, and in terms of common sense, people see it for what it is, and according to international law, that meets the definition of genocide. But for the longest time, there was this reticence here in the United States to simply call this what it was. So this was a conversation that went on for 2 years, and finally, as you just said, Ellie, in March of this year, after a pretty significant coalition of organizations, including IDC and others, gathered together to make this case to the administration came out with this statement that a genocide is occurring. And now we are at this, so we're in a post, and what I should say is, by the way, that the U.S., when they made this designation, the U.S. wasn't even leading that conversation. Many countries around the world and leaders had already made that statement. The European Parliament had already made that designation. A number of international leaders, Chancellor Angela Merkel, several countries in the Middle East. So the U.S. was not leading the way, they were rather joining a consensus. But anyway, so now that we're in this post-ISIS genocide designation world, the question is, what next? What should the United States be doing? And that gets to several different questions, one of which you've raised, which is the refugee question. And from IDC's perspective, we're not so much focused on that particular issue. We are more focused on the question of how the United States can help these communities to remain in Iraq and Syria. So as you said, I recently returned from Iraq, and I should also mention that my colleague Loe Mikhail, who is IDC's senior Iraq advisor, is from Iraq and moved here as an asylee. Was it 2 years ago, Loe?
1 year ago.
1 year ago, that's right. So he is more of an expert than I am on Iraq, but we recently had a delegation go to Iraq to visit some refugee camps, and I can tell you that, beyond the emotional experience of actually seeing how these families are living in 3x5, caravans and barely makeshift living situations where they have, the bathroom and the kitchen and 6 people living all in this one tiny space. When we were talking to these families, they were consistently saying, these were Christian refugee camps in the north of Iraq, in Kurdistan. They were consistently saying, we just want to go home. We want to go back to Karakush. We want to go, but some of them were even from Mosul. We just want to go back home and rebuild our lives. And I should say, people have this perception here in the United States that these refugees are maybe, from a lower class background, not very skilled. Many of these people are actually from middle, upper class backgrounds, are very skilled. Some of them are doctors, scientists, so they not only have the will to rebuild their homeland, but they have the capability as well. So our message to the United States right now is that as we're looking forward towards, particularly on the military side, towards Mosul, with Fallujah having recently been liberated, there's a lot of talk about whether or not that's going to happen, but we're saying regardless of what that timeline is, we should be keeping in mind these victims of genocide, who it is in our national security interest to protect and to help preserve those communities in the region.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on a couple of threads. I think, first of all, the United States is further along toward Europe than you might think, because when we had the terrorist attack in San Bernardino, the first thing we heard from the Attorney General and the President was, we must be sure not to take any action against Muslims. They're more afraid that Americans, who even after 9/11 did not engage in a wave of violence against Muslims, there were always more violent crimes against Jews every year by several multitudes. But that was the thing they were most worried about. And we're being told that that Islam and terrorism don't belong in the same sentence. And this one, some 90% or whatever it is, that the terrorist acts of the last 15, 20 years have come from there. And, we have, picking up on what Václav Klaus said, we lack the civilizational confidence to confront this. We are not sure of our right to prevail. The President said at the outset of his administration, aside from his half-baked history of the Crusades, he seemed to have missed the attack of Muslims from Sicily that sacked St. Peter's in 846, didn't make it into his speech. But, and any other number of things, Hulagu Khan's Million Skull Pyramid, probably Madison Avenue, a few 100,000, but still. The point is, though, that we don't have the confidence that we used to have. It was summed up, I think, perfectly in what Sir Charles Napier said as Viceroy of India around 1842. At that time, the British wanted to put an end to widow burning, suttee, in India. And they were having a lot of trouble with it. And so Sir Charles Napier said, you have a custom, you burn widows, and we have a custom, we hang people who do this. So you will follow your custom and we shall follow ours. We do not have that confidence today. We have a whole political party that lacks confidence in our right to prevail. You see a lot of that, of course, in a lot of, they're very European in their outlook on this already. So we are very far along the way. When after 14 Americans are killed, the big concern is, well, gee, now we don't want a backlash against Muslims. And people are not speaking up. They see things and they don't say things. We've said several instances of this. And it's because they know that if they do, they will have, the furies will be unleashed upon them. They may be threatened with lawsuits they can't afford to fight. They may be accused of hate speech, they may be slandered on television, they may be cyberbullied, and they have no protection. And there's no chance in this administration that there will be. We have to see what we get next to see whether there's any chance there'd be a change. But we are very far down that road. And when you can say, well, they won't use the phrase Islamic terrorism. When Jews, 3 Jews went and killed the Palestinians 2 or 3 years ago, that atrocious murder, nobody said they weren't Jewish. Nobody says when Christians commit heinous acts that they're not Christian. But all of a sudden, at least with Islam, we're afraid to say it. And if the reason is that we will offend people, we have to decide what is a moderate. If somebody's offended by that kind of a description, I would say they're not a moderate. And we haven't reached that point yet. And I think, frankly, we can see happening here the kind of things routinely that happen in Europe. You have hate speech prosecutions. In Norway, I'll end with this, in Norway, and this to me is the thing I worry about most in some ways because it's more insidious. There was, and I confirmed this with Norwegian friends, independently of the news, some of the refugees were put up in Christian hostels in Norway. And they objected to the Christian symbols in these homes. And quite apart from the sheer effrontery of trying to redecorate a place when somebody is taking you in for nothing and is feeding you, leave that aside as a question of manners. What did they do? They petitioned the Norwegian government to order the Christian to take down their symbols. And Norway's incredibly appeasant government ordered that. And they ordered the Christians to take down the symbols. We have here in this country, we have some college, they made space, ordered a Christian church to make space for Muslim students to worship, to carve out. I haven't seen any orders in mosques to make space for Christians to worship. And, police can walk into churches, synagogues, and when they get into mosques, they get into trouble. And one final thing I should mention is, there was a settlement in New York with the New York Police Department and what they would do dealing with Muslims. And one of the things they were required to do, there was a report that came out in August 2007, which I cited in my first book, on the 4 stages of self-radicalization of Muslims. They not only were ordered not to follow it, they were ordered to scrub it from their website. Shades of George Orwell, call your office. We were always at war with Oceania and never at war with your East Asia. So we're much further along than you may think, and if we get another administration that is this way, it'll be too late here too, I think.
I wanted to make a point, and I just wanted to follow up with a question. As we've been having the presence in Iraq and Afghanistan, in that region for over a decade now, we are starting to drive, as I see, Islamic extremists out of Southeast Asia, and driving them towards Europe and to Africa, and building there. And now we're starting to see in these countries throughout Europe, and my fear is the United States soon, are these what they're called as no-go zones, where they're concentrations of the Islamic people that go in and occupy areas like Dearborn, Michigan, cities throughout Europe, and they become areas where you cannot even go in or out. If you go in, you're not coming out. And that's my concern, is how you've seen it throughout the world, and how do you think it's going to evolve if we don't do anything to protect our borders?
Want to take it?
I would like to say something about the Europe situation today. You can find many towns, many cities, where the police, where the cops can't drive the car, because the people, the community of this town, of this city, build like in a little Mecca. We are in the United States, so we have many Little Italy, many Chinatown. Our city are everywhere. Have a Little Italy, Chinatown, or Little Nuova Delhi, New Delhi, but the cops can enter in this part of this city. In Europe, I have a small town around my city. My city is not a city; it's like a building of New York, because we are 40,000, not a lot, 40,000 people. So we are a very small town. If you think, before we talk about this with General Audino, if you think that over 10,000 people today are Muslim, and on 6 boroughs of the city, 2 are under control of the Muslim people, it's very interesting, because 10 years ago, no one can imagine this situation. In just 10 years. So we need to look from today to 10 years. Probably from 10 years, between 10 years, we have the other percentual. We are the 25% of the people that are born and grow up in Chieti, and the 75% people that come to Chieti from other country and build in a different city with and a different story. Just to be honest, I see in my old school that the director of this school take the cross with Jesus Christ because offend the Islamic child. And just a second, this is two child or 900 child. And stop the Christmas revival because can offend this 2 child. So I know I'm not too funny with these people, but I try to find a solution. And I call this director by myself and I say, good morning, I'm Dr. De Angelis, I do this and this and this. Why you don't do the revival for the Christmas? Because can offend the Islamic people on my school. And this is my school. Oh yes, but we can find a solution.
we can find a solution, and you can put these two child in the revival. This is the real integration of the people. This is the real multi-ethnical society. Because if you stop something because can offend someone, you need to stop everything. And I want to say something to Christine. Christine, before you talk about the high skill of refugees, that's right. That's right. Absolutely agree with you. Everyone, every family that send to my country or Europe or the United States some part, probably the sons, just the sons, and not all the parents, just the sons, have 50% of the family with a bachelor. That's right. But I remember the 12 people that do 9/11 in New York City have arrived in United States or Canada or Germany without a bachelor, take the bachelor with the Fulbright chance. So the West people pay the taxes of university to these men that do 9/11, and then, oh wow, but they are high-skilled men. Why do this? Because before all, the Islamic ideology become before all. You can study everything, but before all, you are an extremism. So this high-skilled probably can help you to do one massacre. Massacre. Just can help you. Don't can help me and my society. So I'm very worried about this. If these people have high-skilled, it's just another problem. It's just another problem because we pay for this high-skilled. We pay the taxes for the university of these people, and then we receive the attack. It's not always this story. That's right. Not everyone are like Mohammed Atta. But Mohammed Atta is a product of the West because we pay the taxes of Mohammed Atta. We pay for the home of Mohammed Atta. We pay for build a mosque in Hamburg where Mohammed Atta studied for 10 years. Then we see that Mohammed Atta do 9/11 for Bin Laden in New York City and transform New York City in Mogadishu. So, if you think that this high-skilled is good for the West, this is very wrong. This high-skilled probably, this is the best problems for the West people, because the West people don't study. These people are always with one bachelor, one MBA, in the best universities of the world, and we pay the taxes for these people. This is crazy.
I'd like to make one quick comment before we go because I have to leave. I think it's important, however, that we keep in mind, that there are Muslims and then there are jihadists. We are not at war with all Muslims. I have thousands of very dear Muslim friends. And I mean that, brothers. But we are at war with the jihadists. That's for sure. And history is replete with what I call numerous jihadist revivals since the initial jihadist expansion in the 7th century, 8th century, and beyond. But in every case, and you have to ask this question, in every case where the jihadist revivals were reversed, it was not through soft power. It was not. It was through overwhelming combat power. And the last example, in my opinion, was in the Sudan, Battle of Omdurman, late 19th century, where 10, 15 years of attempted soft power by the Egyptians and the British just wasn't working. And it was only after the death of General Gordon that the British opinion changed. They went back in with about 20,000 troops and allies, Egyptian allies, and they crushed the then Caliphate of the Mahdi at Abdurrahman. They broke it of 70,000 jihadists, and within about a year, the Caliphate collapsed. Okay, that's one point. ISIS is an organization just like the Mahdi's Caliphate was in Abdurrahman in the Sudan. ISIS can be destroyed as an organization. The other aspect of this, however, is the ideology, jihadist ideology. That's a longer-term matter. And we should not try to wring our hands and roll up our sleeves at the same time and say, well, you know, you can never defeat an ideology. Okay, well, that's an interesting point, right? But have we won our war against racism in this country? No. But we still fight it because it's the right thing to do, right? So in this case, I assert to you that the non-jihadist Muslims are and will be much more effective in the defeat of the jihadist ideology over time than we can be. But we have to be honest. We have to be honest. That's why we need the allies in the Muslim world. And there are many. And there's quite a bit we can do to help many of them. And they can be that counterpoint, that absolutely necessary counterpoint to the jihadist ideology of groups like ISIS.
But they're not offended if you use the phrase Muslim terrorist, right? Your Muslim friends would not be offended if you use the phrase Islamic terrorist?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
The ones that I was on the battlefield with.
Then they're real moderates, not the ones that
That's
the
right.
president is worried about.
Exactly. I know that the two generals have to leave. Everybody else is welcome to stay until they kick us out of the room at 2 o'clock. Bob had wanted to say something.
I'll just follow up on Ernie's point. I think that I might suggest that one of the key points in moderating this wave of jihad, and also a byproduct that's very evident, the sublimation of which Western culture, which I think is equally dangerous to us, is through assimilation. And there's a lot of discussion on this nowadays about the difference between the waves of immigration to the United States that has occurred in the past and this current wave that we are embracing, even facilitating now. And I think the bottom line doesn't have to be with skilled labor, doesn't have to be with industries. I think the difference is assimilation. Folks actually wanted to come to this country not for a free meal or for jihad. See you, Ernie. Take care, buddy. But to be part of America and the fabric of America, and to enjoy all that we have to offer as a country. The political correct nature of this, the sympathetic outreach to these folks that come here who are destitute or who need a break or whatever the billboard says that justifies this open embrace, it can't continue. And I think it needs some real leadership to come up and to call it what it is, and then to demand, just as we do of our own citizens, that they can comply with what used to be a pretty clear Judeo-Christian ethics that made this country. Now, I don't think that you can quite define that, but those principles used to be incontrovertible. You cannot discuss America without talking about a core set of principles. Now we have gone into this mass of gray where I don't know what we stand for. When you stand for everything, you stand for nothing. So we need to get back and I think we will through a crisis. It's going to take a bucket of cold water in the American people's face, like 9/11 or like Pearl Harbor, any catastrophe, before we say, wake up, we are in danger of our country here. And until that happens, which it will, thanks to our enemies, we're going to continue down this path. I just hope that bucket of cold water hits us before, as John said, or we're too far down and we've gone, well, we could be. I think there is a logarithmic pattern that talks about exponential growth, where you go, if you follow the graph, you go incrementally higher, higher, and higher, and then all of a sudden, exactly, Michael, you got it. You hit that rocket engine, pour the gasoline on the afterburner, and you can't catch it. So maybe we're there, John. But the point of my discussion that I want to make here is that I think that assimilation is required. We are facilitating non-assimilation. Stephano talks about the enclaves in various cities. Okay, you can worship any way you want, but you cannot have this culture that tears down those principles that made America great, whether it's in school, whether it's in our civic centers, whether it's in our cultural celebrations. And until we have a leader that is elected by the people that said, I've had enough, we're stopping this stuff, I think this drift is going to continue, and then we'll accelerate.
First of all, I'd like to thank Ellie Gold and the London Center for putting this together, and thanks for having American Pulse to cover it. Actually, the topic is what I've been working on for at least 3 or 4 years now, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to cover all the points that I want to talk about, but it's complicated and it's not an easy issue. I'll be very brief as much as I can. I'll give a quick background of myself. I am born and raised in Egypt. I'm Coptic Christian. I was raised in Egypt. I moved here at the age of 19. I delivered food in the streets of New York City for $4 an hour. I lived the American dreams. I currently employ hundreds of people in my private practice beside the TV show. I started the show when I wanted to bridge the gap between the American government and the country that I really respect, that opened the doors for me to prosper and live the American dream, and from my home country that I felt that was betrayed or abandoned by the American administration after the revolutions. So, being that said, I don't want to be a biased Christian talking about Muslims, because I've, like others, have a lot of Muslim friends who are moderate and they have no problems. And I think we're really under big trouble in trying to define that fine line between the Muslim terrorist and the moderate people. And that puts only a burden on our shoulders to try to do the right thing. But right now, I don't think America is under trouble. The whole world is under trouble. The humanity is under trouble. And unfortunately, the Muslim terrorists use the West freedom and laws and regulations against the West. They come here. I met with a Muslim terrorist guy a few years back, right before the September 11. I was in a park in Brooklyn, and I overheard him talking in Arabic and saying, "This country, I hate this country, this, that." And so I turned around. I understand. So I turned around, I'm like, "So if you hate this country so much, why are you here? Just go back." He's like, "No, I need to stay here, take their money, rape their women, abuse everything that I possibly can, and then I'll decide whether to go back or not." So this is the mentality of the people that we're dealing with. So back to the refugee point from Stephano, and I don't want to say that we should completely close the doors, even though that we might. And the reason I'm saying that, because I was not a refugee, but I was in a similar situation. I wanted to leave from Egypt because of the circumstances. I didn't have good opportunity at that time. I felt I had so much energy to try to use in the right place. But in the same time, we really have to be careful of these people coming in. We don't know.
Michael, me too, I'm a refugee. Did you think about it?
No, I understand, but...
We are refugees, but we are a free people. We are freedom.
Yes, but how...
We are not under control of an ideology. You are Michael Morgan here in this table, and I'm Stephano De Angelis around this table, because we are before all freedom, and whole brain are construction of yourself.
Absolutely.
I think one of the...
So, if you don't mind, so now we really have to really fight this terrorism, and the tolerance should be zero. I don't think that we should sit down with these guys. I don't think we should reason with these guys. Tolerance is zero, because people talking about human rights, I want to see the human rights for the people that are being killed and kidnapped and tortured and beheaded every day. There should be no tolerance. And for what the general said earlier, that we have to stick to the allies, I talk on behalf of Egypt because I'm Egyptian, American Egyptian, and I think President Sisi had made it clear when he stood up in Al-Azhar, which is the main Muslim cathedral kind of thing, and he said that we have a fundamental problem in our teachings, and it's our job for the Muslim sheikhs, the priests, the imams, to start really clarifying and cleaning up the speech and stop this hatred speech. And I think America, out of all the countries to start with, where excuse me if I use this quote, but I love this country, and obviously you can see why, but we're accused of sticking our nose where it doesn't belong. And where the time that needed us to stick our nose where it belongs, we're just backed off. So
I think that you make a very good point. I think part of the issue that we face that is actually a result of the president of our administration's policies or refusal of categorizing who we're at war with. And I say that because by refusing to differentiate radical, or use this term, radical Islamic terror, what ultimately happens is to what we'll call the average Joe, who doesn't know, who can't differentiate between peaceful Muslims, radical Muslims, and so on, as you just talked about President Sisi and so on, and our Kurdish friends as well. That now all of a sudden, everybody is a terrorist. We can't. I mean, again, to the average Joe, everybody is a terrorist, and therefore we have to not allow anybody in until we can figure out what to do. Until our governments figure out what the hell is going on, to quote our presidential candidate. So. But if in fact from the beginning we started identifying, that there is this segment of Islam that's militant, and these are the ones that we're after. He just, I guess, what's the saying? They threw the baby with the bathwater. That's just a thought. Linda?
I think we have to remember that most of the hits that we've had, the attacks that we've had, have been second-generation immigrants. You might let the greatest guy in the world in, and the kids are a problem. I don't know how to get around that.
Thank you so much for this event, actually, Ellie, for putting this together. I'm from Iraq, and also he's from Egypt. I think to understand Islam, you need to live in the country where is the Islamic countries that we came from. I lived there 33 years, and now I'm here. I just moved a year ago because of my political views and all this stuff. I 100% agree with Stephano about Europe is really going down because of the building mosque, opening the doors to anybody without making any scan to who's this, who's that. But I have a different perspective than maybe general. There's different types of Muslims, different types of level of Muslims. I'm not saying that Sunni or Shia or radical Islam or normal peaceful Muslim. When Michael says that President Sisi told the Sheikh Al-Azhar to do reforms starting from the education, because I personally believe that Islam is a piece of religion only if you don't understand it. What I mean by that, like living in a country like in Iraq, going to school, going to the work with the friends of Muslims, and you can live among them, and you can ask them about religion. Most of them, they cannot answer you the deep theology of Islam, so they are peaceful people. So if you find, like, I used to have some friends who used to pray 5 times every day, going to mosque every day, reading Quran. You will find those people are absolutely different than those who they don't understand the Islam very well, but they are Muslims. And some of them, they study Islam to come to the West and speak about the Islam. This is the Islam to educating people in Islam. But some, they are very educated, they are deep in Islam, but you will find them very different from those people who are normal Muslims. They are Muslims. They believe in Muhammad as a prophet, and they believe in God as a he sent Muhammad as a messenger, but they don't know the theology, they don't know the deepest haditha and Quran himself. You will find them peaceful. You can live with those people. But the people who understands the religion, as long as you understand it, not for educating people, but for yourself as a believer, you will be changed absolutely. You will definitely change. This is the problem. The start should be from the education, from the Al-Azhar, or from Saudi, or from Qatar, all the places where Wahhabism, which is like, I believe that ISIS ideology it comes from Wahhabism, but it's absolutely more sophisticated than Wahhabism, because Wahhabism already has a country, and ISIS, they sophisticated this ideology to create new country, which is more brutal. I mean, I don't know if any of you have been reading the Management of Savagery. This is the ISIS manifesto. It talks exactly about how to create a state, how to trade people, how to create conditions and situations to make this ideology like something for the world. Yeah, so the Sweden, going back to Italy and Sweden, all these countries, like, I have a brother in German. He lives in Germany for 18 years. He lives in Bonn, and he works for the company right now. And he said, I talk to him every week. He said, I can't mention Islam. I can't mention ISIS. I can't mention radical Islam. I said, why? Because he says he works with the Turkish employees, Turkish workers. He said, if you say that, you might find yourself stepped behind. Like, this is the problem. I mean, there's no more speech of freedom in Europe. And I'm I have a phobia also one day that will happen here, but I hope will not. So we need to fight for it to stop this from happening here. What happened in Orlando now, if, for example, weekends, I speak with my wife, like, should we go somewhere which is crowd or club? Or no, we should stay at home, is more safe. I have now that concern, really. And imagine you fled from the country that you were attacked by Muslims or radicals, and now you come to here and you'll still have this phobia to go some crowded places because of this radical thing, Thank you.
I'm sorry, no, before.
I wanted to ask Martin, I mean, along those lines, what do you see on the local levels here in the States? How are we countering this? And I know that you work closely with police departments, especially after following Orlando. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, think as General Noonan said, what's it going to take for people generally speaking, and that includes the law enforcement world, investigative world, what's it going to take for people to wake up? And he was alluding to his idea where he'd take water in the face or another 9/11. And I think the odds of that happening are diminished, but we are going to see more San Bernardinos, and we're going to see more individual attacks and more single or double jihadists, just one or two people doing these things. To that end, it's extremely difficult if you have a small, tiny group or individuals to prevent really anything. In this land, we can do whatever we want. We don't need to stop at the Virginia border and say who we are and where we're going. It just doesn't work that way. With this extraordinary freedom that we have, we also have human beings also have the ability to do terrible, terrible things for their own religious or whatever their mindset is. So it's a mismatch for our police and law enforcement to look at this in a way where they don't recognize that this is not drama, it's true. This is asymmetrical war. This is not a group of good guys coming up against a group of bad guys and they all recognize each other and we all shoot at each other. That would be symmetrical war. This isn't the revolution. So there are people at war with us, and we cannot, and we have to break this idea, which has been well rooted previously, this idea that it's criminals. It's not just criminals. It's people doing things that are criminal or suspicious in nature that can come to the attention of government officials, local, state, government, police, whatever it might be. And we have to be able to recognize these things better as being the dots that we didn't connect before. So to that end, it's an uphill climb. We don't get warnings. Although sometimes any good guys can sometimes get warnings from the Russians. We got warnings about the Tsarnaev brothers. Looked into it a little bit, let them go, and look what happened. So it's an uphill climb. Bottom line is it's an uphill climb. It's an uphill learning curve, and it's a mindset change on the part of our police and sheriffs and health officials and food safety people to realize that the attack can come from small, medium, large group, and we have to be able to recognize the early warning signals.
Excellent. I'm going to call this to an end, but we have room until 2. Feel free to sit and talk. I will say this, that since there has been some questions about militant Islam versus peaceful Muslims versus non-peaceful Muslims, I do recommend, after buying Stephano's book, you pick up our book, and it tells you all about it. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you next month.
Thank
So
you so
feel
much.
free to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Al.
Thank you.